The 7 deadly sins, lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride, are more than just moral teachings. They have mysterious origins and surprising connections to ancient mythology. Have you ever wondered where these sins actually came from? Or how a list that defines the vices of humanity ended up shaping Western culture for centuries? In today's video, we'll unravel the mysterious roots of the 7 deadly sins, tracing them back to ancient myths, secret teachings, and even Dante's influence. Stick around to discover how these sins evolved from simple flaws to the forces we recognize today. If you love exploring hidden histories and the mysteries behind what we believe, like this video and subscribe for more fascinating content. Let's dive into the shadows of human vice. The pagan roots of the 7 deadly sins. Many people believe that the 7 deadly sins are purely a Christian construct. But what if their origins go even deeper, back to pagan mythology? There is growing evidence that each of the sins has an equivalent in the myths of ancient cultures like Greece, Rome, and even Egypt. Take wrath, for example. In Greek mythology, the god Ares embodied chaos, war, and unchecked rage, traits remarkably similar to the deadly sin of wrath. Pride, often seen as the root of all sin, is mirrored by the Greek myth of Narcissus, whose vanity led to his tragic downfall. Ancient Rome had Fortuna, the goddess who represented fortune and excess, which might easily align with the sin of greed. It's possible that the early Christian thinkers drew from these older traditions to define sin in a way that would be more recognizable to converts from pagan religions. By incorporating these myths, the sins took on a universal appeal that resonated with diverse groups of people, linking the old gods of Europe with the new faith of Christianity. But why did the church adapt these pagan concepts rather than simply discarding them? Could it have been an effort to exert more control, creating moral rules that were already familiar to the masses? Perhaps the 7 deadly sins represent a deliberate blending of older, powerful mythologies into a Christian framework to ease the transition between belief systems. The influence of these myths adds a layer of mystery to the list of vices, making us question whether these sins were always intended as a moral guide or something more. Dante's Divine Comedy, the evolution of sin. When we think of the 7 deadly sins, it's impossible not to think of Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy. Dante's depiction of sin has had an immense impact on how we visualize the consequences of our moral failings. His vivid portrayal of sinners suffering in hell solidified the concept of the 7 deadly sins in popular imagination. But how much of our modern understanding of these sins is based on Dante's interpretations rather than actual church doctrine? In Inferno, Dante assigns specific punishments to each sin, painting a detailed picture of the fate awaiting those who succumb to wrath, greed, or lust. He doesn't simply describe these sins as moral failings. He elevates them to cosmic offenses that deserve elaborate, eternal torment. Interestingly, Dante's approach was heavily influenced by his own time. Medieval Italy was rife with political turmoil, and the Divine Comedy reflects a desire for moral order amid chaos. Could it be that Dante was not only inspired by theological teachings, but also driven by a need to impose his own sense of justice on his enemies and society at large? Dante's work also contributed to making the 7 deadly sins far more dramatic and fearsome, potentially as a tool to control behavior through fear. His portrayal transformed abstract vices into vivid, unforgettable punishments that frightened people into adhering to moral standards. Was Dante's true purpose to entertain, or was he also an unwitting enforcer of church ideology, using his storytelling to shape moral views for generations to come? The evolution of the sins. The story of the 7 deadly sins begins not in opulent cathedrals, but in the barren deserts of early Christian Egypt. In the 4th century, a monk named Evagrius Ponticus first compiled a list of 8 evil thoughts that he believed were the root of all sin. These included gluttony, lust, and sadness, among others. But how did these early monastic reflections evolve into the list of 7 deadly sins that we recognize today? The journey of these sins, from isolated desert monasteries to mainstream Christian doctrine, is a fascinating one. After Evagrius's time, Pope Gregory the Great reduced and modified Evagrius's list in the 6th century, turning the original 8 thoughts into the 7 vices we know today. Gregory's list aimed to categorize human behavior into manageable concepts, making it easier to teach morality to the growing Christian population of medieval Europe. Interestingly, each step in this evolution served a different purpose. For the desert monks, these vices were personal battles, obstacles on the path to spiritual purity. For Pope Gregory, they became a teaching tool, a way to organize sin into distinct categories that could be preached about from the pulpit. And for the medieval church, they became even more, a tool of control, instilling fear and defining moral boundaries for a largely illiterate population. Could the transformation of these sins have been less about spiritual purity and more about social control? The evolution of the 7 deadly sins from solitary reflections in the desert to the foundation of church sermons hints at a deeper intention: to create a moral framework that could be easily understood, widely taught, and effectively used to guide or even manipulate behavior. The mythical beasts and personifications of sin. One of the most fascinating aspects of the 7 deadly sins is how they have been personified over time, often as mythical beasts or demonic figures in art and literature. From medieval paintings to modern cartoons, each sin has often been depicted as a distinct entity. But why did artists and theologians choose to give these abstract ideas physical forms? Take pride, for example. It is often depicted as a lion, a creature that symbolizes power but also arrogance. Wrath has been personified as a dragon, evoking uncontrollable destruction. Envy might be represented by a green-eyed monster, and sloth by a lazy, sluggish creature. These personifications weren't just artistic choices. They served to make the sins more relatable, and their consequences more vivid for the common people, who might not understand abstract theological concepts, but could certainly fear a monstrous embodiment of sin. Were these depictions merely meant to educate, or was there a deeper, more sinister reason behind making these sins so visually terrifying? By giving each sin a distinct and often terrifying form, the church may have been reinforcing the idea that sin is a living, breathing threat, something that could take hold of a person if they were not vigilant. These personifications turned abstract failings into something tangible and frightening, a reminder of the dangers lurking within one's own soul. The visual representations of the 7 deadly sins have left an indelible mark on culture, blending theology, folklore, and art into a shared language of moral caution. Perhaps they were intended not just to warn, but also to fascinate, to capture the imagination and instill a deeper sense of both fear and understanding of human nature. The 7 deadly sins are far more than just a list of vices. They are a window into history, mythology, and the human struggle to define morality. From their pagan roots to their dramatic representation in Dante's work, and their journey from desert monks to medieval Europe, these sins have shaped how we understand human flaws for centuries. Their evolution tells a story of cultural transformation, control, and the power of storytelling. If you enjoyed exploring the mysterious origins of the 7 deadly sins, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden corners of history and myth. Let us know in the comments which sin's origin surprised you the most, and what other topics you'd like us to uncover. There's so much more to explore, and we'd love to have you along for the journey.